Hi, my name is Liz Rivera. I am the Salt Lake Valley Regional Trainer for Utah Foster Care, and I will be doing this series of 8 webinars that will acquaint you with DCFS practice guidelines. Now, I want to stress that this is just an overview. These are, many pages that we've taken a selection from, and we're highlighting just a selection of that selection. I do want to stress that they're all online. And so when you have placement or even before placement and you'd like to review something or answer a question or you just like to read policy, they are available for you. This is the actual website. However, I think I have it bookmarked, but a lot of times I'll just do a quick search for DCFS practice guidelines. It pulls right up. And it's the 300 level that most of you will be interested in, and that is the out-of-home care section. And this is just what the page will look like when you pull it up. Now I'm going to begin with the practice model, and this is the way that DCFS approaches their practice. The Division of Child and Family Services says this is how we are going to engage with all of the parties. So that includes biological families, that includes the children and youth in care, that includes the foster families. So I'm just going to briefly go over these. Protection, kids' safety is, of course, the most important thing. So regardless whether they're in an in-home placement or in foster care or at a kinship placement, we want to make sure they're safe, that children and families, including foster families, are receiving the services they need to reach their developmental potential. Permanency is more than just a legal status. I love this definition, that all children need and are entitled to enduring relationships that provide a family stability, belonging, and a sense of self that connects children to their past, present, and future. I absolutely love that. And it's more than, just the ideas of reunification or guardianship or adoption. It is really about making sure these kids are existing within a family unit, and that can be defined in many ways, and it becomes a beautiful thing. Cultural responsiveness, that all families, including foster families, deserve to be seen in the context in which they approach and understand the world. Partnership, that DCFS can't do everything themselves, and so they recruit and use a lot of different agencies in the community to help support the children and the families that they work with. The competence of the organization, is there enough administration, too much administration, enough frontline staff, is the where they report to, does it make sense? Is there good supervision? So how competent is the organization itself? And then finally, how competent are the individual professionals in their work? So these 7 principles are the principles that guide and inform all of DCFS's practice. And we want to make sure you're acquainted with them so you can hold DCFS and yourself accountable to them. Now I'm going to briefly go over some responsibilities of you as the foster or resource parent. Now, there are 3 different sets of responsibilities you'll see. You'll see these ones, which are in practice guideline. You'll see a set that are going to be enumerated in the agreement that you'll sign between you and DCFS once you're approved for placement. And then there's an additional set of responsibilities that you'll sign with the individual placement agreements. Now, there's a lot of overlap between them, but there are a few things that are different. So make sure you read through each one of those sets of responsibilities. Most of them, there's nothing that's going to surprise you. That they just are going to, we expect you to provide the kind of care I think it would be very, what's the word I want to use, just obvious that we would expect children in care to receive. Unfortunately, we do have to make sure it's spelled out in case someone does, it's not obvious to everybody. So I'm just going to run through a few of these. I've bolded the ones I'm going to hit. If you're listening to this instead of reading it, I'd like you at some point to maybe go back and just flip through the PowerPoint and get a chance to see the stuff that we've talked about, the stuff that I'm maybe not talking about, but is on the screen. So the first one, obviously, these children are going to be full members of your household. So they're going to have all the rights and responsibilities of any member of your household, depending upon their developmental situation. So that means they get to do chores, and they also get to have fun, and they get to be a part of your family for however long they're going to be in your home. The third one, committing to permanency. Committing to the children in your home until permanency is established. So the first goal of almost all children who come into care is reunification. The secondary goal is placement with family besides mom and or dad. And then below that somewhere might be potential adoption by the foster family, although that is not a priority. But regardless of the outcome of the case, we are asking the foster family to maintain that child in their care until that permanency is established. Discipline is constructive rather than punitive. And we'll talk about this as you come through pre-service. We also do in-service classes on this so that we can acquaint you with a lot of effective, humane, and sound methods. I just want to read this piece because I do think it's important. All of it's important, this especially. Use of corporal punishment, physical or chemical restraint, infliction of bodily harm or discomfort, deprivation of meals, rest, or visits with family, or humiliating or frightening methods to control the actions of children is never allowed. So if you ever question some kind of discipline technique you're going to use, first of all, none of those are discipline, they're all punishment, then this would be a list you would always want to stay away from. The next one is confidentiality. You will be privy to a lot of very confidential information about these children and their families, and we would ask that you maintain that, with the exception of professionals that may need to know more, like doctors or therapists or someone in a school. If you ever have a question about what you can share and with whom you can share it, your caseworker is always going to be a good source of information. They're going to be a good source of information on all of this stuff. Just as we're talking about confidentiality, I want to just briefly address social media because that's such a big part of so many of our lives. You can share the children's not their information, but like their name and their picture on social media if the parent who still retains parental rights gives written permission, and then you would need to let the caseworker know that that parent had given permission. If there's more than one parent, then you would need to get both parents' permission. If the child is over 8 years old and has the capacity to understand, you also have to get the child's permission. All of that would be documented by the caseworker. And if you are sharing information, you're not going to put a picture of the kid on and say, this is our new foster kid. It's not going to be about the fact the child's in foster care. It's going to be about the fact you guys went to Lagoon, and here's this great picture of all the kids having a great time. And you are maybe saying the kids' names, or maybe you're not. Maybe just put the picture up there. And if someone says, who's that kid? Now, if you're a foster family, they're going to probably know who that kid is because all of a sudden you have a new kid. They're going to know why. But try to not identify the fact that this child is any different than any other kids in your home, and ask. And social media is hard because there's a lot of people on there you don't see every day. They're not going to know everything, but maybe just put a quick disclaimer every once in a while on your social media platforms. Hey, we're foster families. Occasionally we have pictures of kids who come across our feed. Please don't ask us about them. Please don't ask us information because we can't share. And just be very judicious about the information you do share, remembering that these are not your kids, and that you want to be careful about the information you're putting out into the world about them, which is probably true for our own kids too. We're going to hit number 9, that if a child has a faith practice that they would like to continue in the observance of, we ask that you help facilitate that. Now, if it's different from your own, or if you don't have a faith practice, your caseworker can help you figure out ways to still get this child to be able to practice, whether it's a family member of the child's family, a member of their previous congregation, you have a neighbor of that faith. There's lots of ways it can get worked out, but just to try to find ways to do that. Number 11, the child and family service plan is written in the first 45 days of removal. If the child is in your care in that first 45 days, you will be involved in that. But even after that 45 days, you still may be involved if there are any substantive changes. Number 12, the next page, making sure the child gets to the visits. So we know from research that consistent visits with parents, are the number one predictor of quick and successful reunification. Keeping that relationship alive, keeping it in the forefront of everyone's mind is essential. So making sure that you're supportive and you're getting kids to those visitations. And they'll work with you as far as scheduling goes, but make the visitation a priority in your life. And which goes on with the next one, that we're going to, once again, the goal is reunification, so we want to help these kids maintain as positive a relationship as possible with their family. And your caseworker can assist in that as well. We're going to skip down to number 15. Just in that actually kind of 15, 16, I'm going to combine those. You're going to get a home-to-home book, which is a binder with some folders in it that help you keep track of receipts, dates of placement, all of the medical forms. take that book with you to your medical appointments, because that will have the records of previous visits, immunizations, maybe other records of medical care that are in there to help maintain continuity of care. Number 17, making sure that the caseworker and the healthcare team, you'll have a nurse that's also assigned to the case, that everybody knows what's going on. So you're the one that's going to be going to these appointments, so you're kind of the main source of information. And the child's parent may also attend. Now, when I say may, I mean they are allowed to attend and they might attend. So this will be done in coordination with the nurse, and they can help you facilitate that and figure out what that may look like. And then number 19, in that home-to-home book, you're also going to document the medication. And this is all medications, so over-the-counter prescribed medications, documenting. And you can just, there's forms you can use where you can just write the date, the dosage, who gave it to the child, the time. Maybe have you initial it off, the child initials it off if they're old enough. And then any information on medication management. And then finally, the last one on this page, certainly documenting any concerns or effects, especially negative effects, or I guess positive ones too. You'd want to let the doctors know. We're going to skip to number 24 on this one, that you're going to be in the place of the parent as far as school goes. So you're going to help with homework and go to parent-teacher conferences. And if you are concerned about the child getting the services they need in school, you're going to talk to the caseworker about the potential of an IEP or individualized education plans. You're going to attend those meetings. If any of you have ever had opportunity to advocate for a child with special needs in school, you know it can be not the easiest process, and yet essential to make sure kids are getting what they need in school. It's such a big part of their life. You're going to go to those child and family team meetings. Now, depending on the case, they may be held every month or every few months, just kind of a check-in or making sure things are going well. You are invited to attend those. You can be called, you can be phoned into those. If you can't go in person, you can send information with the caseworker or the resource family consultant to represent you if you can't be there and maybe you can't be phoned in for some reason. And if you, regardless of how you participate, we want you to participate. You are a member of that team, and your point of view and your information needs to be heard. I've heard foster parents say they've never driven so much in their life as when they've been foster parents. So between getting those visits and therapy and getting them caught up on immunizations and getting their dental care taken care of, especially in the beginning of the case, there can be an awful lot of appointments and driving. So be prepared for that. And you do get a small mileage reimbursement for fulfilling requirements of the case. So you're not going to get paid every time the kid's in the car. You don't get paid for going to Harmon's because the kid's in the car, but you will get reimbursed because you're taking the child to a visit with their birth parents or to court or to a doctor appointment, those kinds of things. I will go over that later. And then of the money you receive each month, $41 is to be spent on new or gently used clothing, and you'll keep those receipts in the home-to-home binder. And if you want to sew the child's clothes, and you can, but you cannot charge for your labor in doing so. I'm going to skip down to number 31. Any accidents, even minor injuries and accidents, especially any kind of bruising, scratches, you're going to want to make sure the caseworker knows that, because we don't want the kid to show up to a visit a week later and have a goose egg because they fell off their bike and you didn't let the caseworker know, and you could potentially have an allegation against you, which we'll also talk about that later on. And then number 32, any big changes in your home, you need to let your licensor know, your caseworker and your licensor know right away. So if you're single and you get married, maybe you have a baby, or maybe you adopt, anything that changes your family composition, or you move, certainly let your caseworker and licensor know that right away. Now we're going to briefly go over your rights. The pages for your rights aren't as great as the responsibilities are, but they're still very important. So first of all, to be treated with respect, you're not a babysitter. You are a member of the child and family team. You are caring for these kids. You're going to know more about these kids in a different way than anyone else does. So make sure that you speak up and you are heard, because your input is valuable. Any questions about these practice guidelines or other things you just don't know how to take care of, getting the kids, dental care taken care of, or they need their wisdom teeth removed or something like that, your caseworker is there to help you get that worked out. So you have the right to get your questions answered and the assistance you need. Your confidentiality is to be respected. If you have a new caseworker, make sure you talk with them and say, hey, new caseworker, I just want to make sure you understand that our identifying information is not to be shared with the biological family. Now, obviously professionals it can be shared with, but not the biological family and or any non-professional involved in the case. And just go over in child and family team meetings, please don't use our last names, please don't use our last name in court, please don't put our addresses down or phone numbers down or anything. Now, we'll talk a little bit in pre-service. There are times when it may be appropriate for the biological family to know even where you live. We've had situations where the biological family will actually go to the home of the foster family for visits. That can be appropriate. In the beginning of the case, you probably want to make sure that the less information shared is better. Then as the case progresses, you can reduce those limits as appropriate. Constituent services, this is an organization or a level of administration within DCFS that if you are concerned the way you've been treated, a case has been handled, a caseworker, maybe their professionalism or lack thereof, you have the right to express those concerns. If you feel that DCFS either hasn't heard those concerns or taken them seriously, you have a right to actually contact what's called the Child Protection Ombudsman, and that is an organization within the state that investigates DCFS. So if you feel that the level of conduct is egregious enough that it would warrant something like that, you have the right to do that, and there is no negative effects on you if you do that in good faith. And then finally, number 5, if there's a problem, if you've been overpaid, you have the right to due process to making sure that it's worked out okay so that you're not financially hurt by that. This form is just the first page of the foster care agreement. What you will receive will be there'll be more pages, but make sure you read it and before you sign it. And a lot of it, like I said, there's a lot of overlap between these, but there are a few things that are a little bit different. So make sure you take the time and read that as you sign that. And then same thing with the placement agreement. There are some overlap, but there's some new things. Make sure you read that. And then, of course, once you have been doing this for a while, this will become very familiar to you, and you'll know what is in these. The biological parent also has some residual rights, and these are maintained until and unless parental rights are terminated. These stay intact all through the life of the case until that point, if that does happen. And the ones that kind of affect foster families the most, the child's religious affiliation. So if the child began to want to go to a specific faith and they wanted to go through whatever ritual it would be to become an official member of that faith, they would need to have their parents' permission. The parent has a right to see the child. So the visitation, the parent has a right to that under law for them to see their child. And then the last one, and the nurse and the caseworker will help with this. If the child needs any major medical, you are not to sign for that. The biological parent is to, and in lieu of them, the caseworker. But if it's an emergency, obviously you sign whatever you have to sign. We'll take care of it later. But certainly anything planned, you're not going to sign for that. And then the other ones that kind of show up are cultural practices that the parent may ask you to observe. So I have a coworker who is Navajo, and in their faith tradition, there's certain things that they're not supposed to even look at or touch. And that's a very important part of their faith tradition. So if there's something like that, we would ask you to honor those things. And then a child's appearance. You cannot make any changes to the child's appearance, even if they're temporary in nature, without the parent's permission. So we're not cutting their hair, we're not dyeing their hair, we're not piercing their ears, we're not letting them get tattoos, obviously. Anything like that would not be okay. And then once again, religion. If you have a faith practice, you can invite the child into that faith practice. So if you have a daily family devotional, weekly worship, you can invite the child to attend with you or to participate in that, but you can never force a child to do that. And you would need to find alternative supervision. For instance, if you were going to go to your worship services and the child just didn't want to go at all, you just find alternate supervision for that child while you're attending your services. And then once again, if a child has a faith practice, then we would ask you help them to maintain that. And then doesn't this picture scare you? Like, we don't want these kids driving. If you have a youth who is of age to get a driver's license, we want to make sure they're getting the education that they need to get that driver's license, that they're not being held back. However, while you can sign for the youth to get their driver's license, you are not required to. And understand you're taking upon yourself the same liability you would if you were signing for a child who's legally yours to get their driver's license. So you may feel comfortable, you may not feel comfortable. Always make sure you're doing this in consultation with the child and family team. And the caseworker is never to ask you to sign for the driver's license, even if everybody thinks it's a good idea. They're not even to ask you to sign. One population that we're especially concerned about are kids who fall under the queer umbrella or the LGBTQAI kids. That these kids, we know from the research, have higher risk of homelessness and bullying and interpersonal violence and substance abuse and homeless. I think I already said homelessness. This is a group of kids that their safety is at risk, and we want to make sure that they are in environments in which they're fully accepted and embraced for who they are. Now, this used to primarily apply to adolescents, but we are seeing younger and younger kids so identify. So be prepared that you may have kids who identify under the queer umbrella who are younger, who are maybe school age. So if you don't have a lot of information about this population of kids yet, the Pride Center and Encircle are two great organizations. I know in Salt Lake County, I'd have to look it up, but I know Salt Lake County Pride is very active, and Circle as well, and Circle is also really active in Utah County. But whatever area you live in, and some of you in the rural areas may have less access, but try to find organizations that will help you better understand this population, as well as opportunities to provide support and acceptance for these kids. And that is the end of this one. Now, this one is about just over 20 minutes. I'm going to try to keep most of them to about 10 to 15 minutes. This is probably the longest one. So I will see you, or you'll hear me on the next one, which is the DCFS practice guidelines regarding childcare and respite. Thanks so much.